Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review and my thoughts on the 2021 much anticipated, long awaited, long gestating Snyder Cut. Now, before I get into sharing my views on Zack Snyder's Justice League, I want to give a very special shout out to Nick for requesting this review. He made a very generous donation, and I wanted to thank him from the bottom of my heart for that, as well as for all of you for any of the support that you've given to my channel over the years, old and new. And I hope that you find this video to be somewhat enjoyable or interesting or worth your while. And also, before I dig deep into this film and really dissect it, I want to make this very clear. If you like this film, I think that's great. I have no problem with that at all. And I think it's a wonderful thing that you find this film to be worth your while, you find it to be enjoyable, and especially for those of you who have been waiting for this and have been fighting for it, I'm glad that it has been everything that you hoped it would be. So I wanted to make that clear. I don't take this personally. I'm not personally against Zack Snyder because I don't like this movie. I'm not personally against fans of this film or fans of Zack Snyder because I'm not a fan of this film. So I just want to make that clear. I think some people, when they see the title, they see Rant in the thumbnail or in the title, they take it personally. And I just want to make it very clear that I'm not taking any of this personally. So I hope you're able to look at this that way and be like, okay, it's just a different opinion. And that's all it is. Because I don't think you're wrong for liking this film or thinking it's a masterpiece or thinking it's a great movie. I disagree, but that doesn't mean that I think you're wrong. Zack Snyder is an acquired taste. I'm going to be honest, especially when it comes to his preferred take and his preferred style with these films, with these DC movies. If this style is something that you appreciate, if it's something that you really enjoy, then you're probably going to like this film because it's maximum Snyder. It's everything that you already really like and really love amplified. The slow-mo, the attempts at being deep, the epicness of it all. If that's something that you're already a really big fan of, you're probably going to love this. If that's something that you're not really that fond of, if Maximum Snyder is not something that you really enjoy or you really can stand, this is a very rough watch. It's incredibly difficult to sit through because it's Snyder at his most Snyder. It's ultimate maximum Snyder. And ultimate maximum Snyder is obnoxious. It's obnoxiously loud. It's obnoxiously epic. It's obnoxiously self-indulgent. It's obnoxiously pretentious. And it's obnoxiously long and drawn out. And I'm not even going to say Snyder's direction is terrible. I think he does have talent when it comes to creating some striking, memorable visuals. I do. I've always felt that way. 300, Watchmen, etc. And there are some moments in this that are really impressive visually. But there's a lot of things where he just does too much, and it's really evident in this film. An overdose of slow-mo. Just way too much fucking slow-mo to the point where it's excessive and annoying. It doesn't help the scenes. he overdoes it so much that it becomes tedious and no longer cool because it's just more of the same. And there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of repetitive shots and repetitive things. Flash's speed. Whenever he's running around, there's lightning bolts everywhere. And that gets really old after a while. And there's a lot of other things. Like there's this music that he chooses for certain sequences early on in the film and also later that are just awful. I don't know why he thought he needed to bring in Enya to do the soundtrack, but that's what you hear. Might as well be. He might as well have hired Enya to do these chants that are strewn throughout the first half of the film for the most part. And yeah, it's just so much excess. From the length of the movie, from the action sequences. There's these big, grand action scenes, but they don't really have the impact that I think Snyder was looking for, at least for me personally, because I don't care. See, that's the issue. There's no reason for me to care about a bunch of nameless gray faces fighting Darkseid, or a bunch of nameless gray faces fighting each other or other people, or Steppenwolf fighting a bunch of nameless gray faces, a bunch of Amazonians that I don't give a fuck about and don't know two shits about. Why should I care? I need some kind of investment with these action scenes. It also doesn't help either that they're not convincing because of the cheap green screen effects and the floaty physics. But if I had someone that I actually cared about or had a reason to care about in those scenes, then I can maybe deal with the floaty physics and the cheap green screen effects. But the fact that I don't makes it not very exciting or fun to watch. And you have other stuff like the epilogue where Batman swears and he's acting like he's Lobo or some shit, talking about how I'm gonna fucking kill you, Joker. And it's just one of those things where it's like, this is too much. This is unnecessary. So there's a lot of that. A lot of moments in this where it's too much and it's unnecessary. When you're first introduced to the Flash and he has this scene where he saves this girl from being hit by a car, and for some reason there's a moment where Barry Allen becomes Bad Touch Barry and starts touching her face. Like, what the hell? That's too much. We don't need that. That's not necessary. Why did you turn Barry Allen into Bad Touch Barry? That's not something that was remotely needed. So yeah, it's just one of those films that there's just so much excess. Needed to trim some of the fat. If you just cut out some of the slow-mo, it would probably be an hour shorter. And the screenplay, I will admit, it is better than the 2017 take on this story. It has more depth to the characters. It improves the narrative in a lot of different ways. But when it comes to the character development, you have 2 extra hours. So that does a lot. You can more easily have more character development with 2 extra hours to work with. And the character development that's added, it's not that captivating. Yes, Cyborg has more of a backstory now, but it's not that interesting. It's not that enthralling for me. He's the mopey teen who got hurt. He lost his mother in a car accident. His dad tries to fix him and fucks up and turns him into cyborg. So now he's resentful and he's mad at his dad. So he's a mopey, angsty teenager who's now part cyborg. Woohoo. Great. The stuff with the Flash, they do something with they introduce his dad and him having commitment issues in terms of getting a job or moving on in his life. Well, all right, whoop-de fucking Aquaman, he's still in a lot of ways an Aqua bro, but they tone that down a little bit, and so I got to give the writers credit for that. Superman, that whole thing still sucks. It still has the same issues as Justice League because it's too quick to have this death and return storyline. There's no reason to believe that he became this symbol of hope for everybody, since in Batman vs. Superman, there were multiple scenes where people were hating him. Also, this whole stuff with Lois feeling sad about Clark and Superman being dead, everything happened so quickly, she might as well have only known him for a few months. That's at least what it feels like. So there's none of that legacy that's in place with the Death and Return comic book storyline that's built from years and years and years of comics. That's why they should have done a Man of Steel 2 instead of Batman vs. Superman and do the death of Superman and then the return here. It doesn't have the same impact as it does in the comics because it's just too rushed. Yeah, he wears his black suit and it's cool looking. I definitely got to give the costume designer a lot of credit, but it's still the same thing. Superman still feels like a really disposable, forgettable character in this movie. The return doesn't have this triumphant feel and vibe to it like it does in the comics because everything just happened too quickly. With Batman, he's still saying lines like, I'm rich, when he's asked what his superpower is. He doesn't know how to handle a secret identity. I don't get it. I guess Snyder wanted to make Bruce Wayne into James Bond or some shit. I don't understand this logic. Why the hell Bruce would just constantly be giving away his cover is something that blows my mind, but okay. And he is given a little bit more to do in terms of action, which I do appreciate, especially in the finale. But still, Batman doesn't feel like he's a really big part of the Justice League, even though he's the one that got them all together. Because there's a lot of times during these battles where it seems like he's just on the side. It's almost like Snyder felt that, oh, well, he's a human, so we can't really fight Steppenwolf, which is bullshit. Batman's done all kinds of stuff in the comics where he's fought all kinds of aliens and entities and all kinds of villains. So to have him on the sideline is lame. Wonder Woman, I think Snyder does a better job writing her in terms of making her a badass and a believable badass than Patty Jenkins and company. So I will give him that. But at the end of the day, these characters, they're still meh. I'm still very indifferent on the Justice League, on the heroes, and this interpretation of these heroes. And the villain, yes, Steppenwolf feels more like a strong foe in terms of the fact that he has moments where he's intimidating and he's more of a presence, cuts people in half underwater and does all this kind of stuff. And he has more of a backstory and a motivation. The motivation, though, is, I think is a little weak. Oh, he just wants to go home. What is he, E.T.? Steppenwolf, phone home. Uh, I know. It's because he betrayed Darkseid. He tried to take the throne. Darkseid caught him, made him his lackey, and forced him to conquer 50,000 worlds. And only if he did that, would he allow Steppenwolf to go home. But okay, you made him sympathetic. That's such a trope in modern comic book cinema. I swear every single Marvel superhero film has a villain that is sympathetic. So having Steppenwolf also be sympathetic is nothing really that amazing to me. And you have Darkseid. Darkseid's brought into the fold, and I like Darkseid as a character. I've always liked his appearance in stuff like Superman the Animated Series and the comics. And it's cool to see Darkseid, but I feel the way that he's written here is pretty detrimental because he first shows up in a flashback and he's in a battle with Atlanteans, Amazonians, and some gods, and a Green Lantern, and for the most part, he just gets his ass kicked. He shows up, fights some people, takes some people out, kicks the Green Lantern's ass in like 30 seconds, and then he gets shot with an arrow and gets hit with an axe, and then runs away like a bitch, bleeding like a stuck pig, with his tail behind his legs. Pathetic. Weak. I don't care if it was that way in the comics. You can change it. You can do things differently. And I know some people say, well, it's because he was inexperienced. He was young. The film never really establishes that. You have this sleepy, bored narration from Wonder Woman telling you this backstory, and then all you see is Darkseid show up, barely get much of a dent in this army, and then get his ass kicked, and then retreat. Lame. It makes this big bad for this new universe, who's supposed to be this big, intimidating presence, seem like he's not that big of a deal. And it also hurts Steppenwolf, because if they could take out Darkseid, Steppenwolf shouldn't be a problem at all for the Justice League. So yeah, I don't like the way that Snyder and company handle Darkseid. It's cool to see Darkseid, and the effects company that did all the CGI for Darkseid did a really great job. But I think the way that they handled him was uh, a misfire. It was a big missed opportunity. It's like if you had a heel in wrestling who's promoted for months as being this unstoppable force, and then the very first match he has, he gets pinned clean by a babyface. And I know some people are like, well, he couldn't win, he couldn't conquer Earth because that happened in the past. Yes, and I understand that. That's why you make it so he does this whole invasion of Earth to get one mother box. That's the whole plan, for him to take the mother box from Themyscira or whatever. So then he goes in and he attacks everybody, and then he just shows up, he wrecks everyone, steals the mother box, and leaves. And if you heard anything in the background, that's my mom just sneezing, because I think she's probably allergic to this bullshit as well. But regardless, seriously, just have him fucking show up, wreck people, take one mother box, and get out of there. Why does he have to? Why does he have to go to Earth, and in this flashback, just get his ass whooped? Why? And with the mother boxes, I will also give the screenwriters this. They give more context. They provide more explanations about why the mother boxes are important and what they do. So I do feel that's an improvement over the 2017 cut in that regard as well. I also feel the finale at Chernobyl, it's massively improved with the variation of action sequences and how things are overall handled. I do feel that that is a much better take on the finale. I feel the battle with Steppenwolf and the Justice League is much more satisfying. I mean, Wonder Woman at one point cuts off his fucking head. That's legitimately pretty badass. Despite some really lame slow mo at times. That being said, it's still something that has the right intent, and it's a lot more memorable and enjoyable and genuinely cool than the ending of the original version, the 2017 cut, when it comes to what happens to Steppenwolf. All of that being said, it's still at the end of the day the same plot as the 2017 cut. It's not really that much different. I don't agree with some of the critics who say it's massively, dramatically different. I don't really see it that way at all. It's still pretty much the same thing. It just has more character development for certain characters and a different take on Steppenwolf, and you also introduce Darkseid. And I don't feel that the Where Are They Now edition of Justice League, which is the majority of the first hour and a half of the film, plus the Flash and Cyborg Power Hour, is really that enjoyable. It's boring to me because a lot of it's just filling me in on things that after a certain point are just not interesting. So you're really just left with this really long drawn out catch up because the film is playing catch up after the events of Batman versus Superman. So you get to know what's going on with Aquaman, what's going on with Wonder Woman, what's going on with Batman, what's going on with Cyborg, how did he uh, become who he is, what's going on with the Flash, and also what's this dark side, why is Steppenwolf trying to do anything, why have the mother boxes awakened and all this stuff, and it's just tedious. It's tiresome. And then when you get to the part where the Justice League, they're together and they go in and they fight some parademons and they fight Steppenwolf, it's okay, but it's still nothing spectacular. I like the bits of action in the finale, but that amounts to maybe 15 to 20 minutes tops out of a 4-hour movie when it comes to things about the narrative and the screenplay and the story that I liked. And when it comes to other aspects of the film, you got the cast, it's still the same cast. Ben Affleck is Batman, Gal Gadot is Wonder Woman, Ezra Miller as the Flash, Ray Fisher as Cyborg, and Jason Momoa as Aquaman. And Henry Cavill as Superman. And I like Ben Affleck, but it's still not one of his best roles. And I do feel bad for Ben because I think he really wanted to do a Batman solo film. But then DC went into a different direction and he was contractually obligated. So he did Batman vs. Superman and he did Justice League. But you could tell his heart really wasn't in it all the way. I will say his performance here is stronger than his performance in Justice League because in Justice League, he was doing reshoots and you could tell he just didn't want to fucking be there. So that isn't really the case here. You don't have moments like that, but it still doesn't feel like he's giving his all. And Ray Fisher, he's gotten a lot of credit. He's gotten a lot of positive reviews for being nuanced. I don't get it. I don't understand what performance they are seeing, because I didn't see any of that here. He was just a mopey, dopey, angsty teenager with one note when it comes to his acting, which was flat. It was flat, dull acting. I know he's supposed to be a cyborg, but that doesn't mean he doesn't need to have any personality or charisma. Gal Gadot is what she is. She's a stunt woman who should not be starring in a film or given that much dialogue. And I have to admit, I think Snyder realized her faults, so he doesn't have her say that much in this film. Most of the stuff with Wonder Woman is her in action, and that's where Gal is at her best. Physical stunts and being the physical presence of Wonder Woman. And Snyder did a good job with her scenes, making her a physical presence. But she still doesn't really have that much of an impact on me personally when it comes to her character and her portrayal of Wonder Woman. I'm very indifferent on that. I don't, and indifferent actually is taking it lightly. I'm not a fan of her take on Wonder Woman. I know a lot of people love it, and I think that's great if you feel that way, but I don't like it. I don't care for it. Ezra Miller, he's toned down here as the Flash, but he's still irritating and has too much energy and is trying too hard to be funny and is never funny one time. And yes, the screenplay gives him more to do with him going back in time and so on and so forth, but I don't like his take on the Flash, so I don't care. That's really one of the film's biggest problems. It doesn't do a very good job keeping me engaged for 4 hours. Not with these characters, not with this story. So it just spins its wheels like it's stuck in the mud. And Jason Momoa, I liked him better in Aquaman, and here he's just there. Henry Cavill, just there. There really wasn't a lot of time for him to have much pathos, much of a character arc. So what he was asked to do, he did all right with that. Speaking of Superman, I do like how Snyder and the writers handled his fight with Steppenwolf and his place in the battle with Steppenwolf at the end of this cut versus the 2017 cut. I especially like the big fuck you punch Superman gives to Steppenwolf. And so I talked about Wonder Woman, Batman, Aquaman, Flash, and Superman, and Cyborg. Steppenwolf, still just a CGI monster with armor. Really not much of anything. It felt like a mini boss. I don't think he was as pathetic as he was in the 2017 cut, but I thought he still sucked. I didn't think he was a good villain or a memorable villain or a strong villain. And then you have stuff like the epilogue, which I don't. Jared Leto comes back as the Joker and removed all the tattoos and stuff, but he delivered the same Jim Carrey Riddler-esque performance, and it was atrocious. Talking about giving Batman a reach around. What? And then you got Batman saying things, I'm gonna fucking kill you, Joker. Like, yeah, that totally fits Batman. And that whole thing just felt like fan service. Just like the Martian Manhunter thing. And then with the Martian Manhunter thing, that was just weird and awkward. The first time you see him in this, it's a twist. You think that Lois is talking to Martha, and then all of a sudden, you find out that Martha was Martian Manhunter the entire time. Because he has to make sure that Lois is alive and Lois cares about Clark and Cal. Otherwise, the horrible nightmare future is going to happen because Superman will no longer care about hope and truth, justice, or the American way if Lois is dead. All right. Okay. But why does the screenplay assume that Martha would not want to speak to Lois? Especially since they know each other and Martha knows how close Lois was to Clark. You would think that if she knew that Lois was having a hard time, that she would go out of her way to talk to her. Why do you have to have this thing set up where Martian Manhunter decides to be Martha and do all that for Martha when Martha could just do it herself? Why do you have to do that? It's just weird. And speaking of weird, there's a lot of other weird stuff. Like when Aquaman is at the Swedish village and Batman shows up and he's there to try to get him to join the Justice League. You have this weird stuff where these, maybe it's not Swedish, maybe it's Scandinavian. Okay, my bad. But you have these villagers and they're chanting, and you're like, why? And then one of the villagers picks up Aquaman's dirty, sweaty sweater and just gives it a big huff. It's like, what in the fuck is that about? Really pretentious, awful scenes like when Lois is going to get a cup of coffee and there's this chanting in the background. Like I said, why did you hire Enya to do the soundtrack? I And then you have the stuff like I mentioned earlier, like The Flash, with him being Bad Touch Barry. So yeah, I don't understand these weird things that don't really need to be there. It's just excess on an epic level. And the score by Junkie XL, he came back. He already did a score for this, but the studio didn't like it, so then they went in a different direction and brought on board Danny Elfman. Now, Danny Elfman's a legend, and I felt that his score was one of his worst in Justice League, so there was a lot of room for improvement. That being said, I didn't see much of it. Junkie XL's done some really good work in the past, but this is a very generic, forgettable score. I don't remember one note from it. The most memorable music in this score was from other composers from other films in the DC Cinematic Universe. When it comes to other technical aspects of the movie, the editing at times, it's a bit too laborious. It could use a little bit more punch to it in terms of cutting things out or cutting things in a different way. There's other times too where it seems like it's a little too fast. The overuse of slow-mo is something that I blame Zack Snyder more for than the editor. And that is such a serious problem. Like, there's a scene supposed to be epic at the end where Flash is going back in time. And it's overused and overblown so much with the slow-mo that it feels slow. This is supposed to be an epic scene and the Flash is going back in time. And it's slow as molasses. And then there's other shots where it pans away and he's like a little freaking speck on the screen in this just CGI cloud of gray and bleh. And speaking of gray and bleh, that's another thing. The cinematography, I was not a fan of. I don't like this near sepia tone filtering that this film has. That's one thing I think the 2017 film did well. It brought some actual color into the franchise instead of this dark gray brown sludge. And the pacing is miserable. I know it's long, and I know it's one of those films that it's set up that way on purpose. But like I said, there's not enough there for me to care. So it goes by like it's 8 hours instead of 4. And you feel every second, every minute of this 4-hour running time to the point where you really feel like Donovan at the end of Last Crusade. You're wasting away in your chair while you're watching Zack Snyder's Justice League. Yeah, I thought this film sucked. I thought it was not anything more than really an epic failure, because Zack Snyder, he managed to do something with this film that I have never seen before when it comes to a big comic book event film. When he failed with this, he failed on interstellar galactic levels that I don't even think anyone else is going to come close to failing on when it comes to the scale of this film's failure. So I got to give him that. He went big, and he went big all the time. He always swung for a home run. He always threw for a touchdown, or at least tried to. And it's one of the film's biggest flaws, because to me, the epicness of it all really starts to lose its impact about halfway through. And then at that point, it's just trying to catch its breath, because it's completely winded and it's no longer able to throw bombs. So it's one of those things where if you think that it being epic all the time is awesome, it's probably going to be awesome for you. If you think that it being epic all the time isn't, it's going to be an awesomely awful experience, because it's just going to keep falling flat on its face and its ass over and over again for 2 to 3 hours. To me, the Snyder Cut is the DC cinematic equivalent of a monster truck. It's big, it's loud, it's overindulgent, it's over the top, it's excessive. And it seems like it might be fun, but there's only very few moments of monster truck carnage. It's like if you had this monster truck and it was souped up and it was crazy and it was big and it was gigantic, but it only had half a tank of gas, and it spent most of the time while it was on the track spinning its wheels and just expelling a ton of smoke. That's really the Snyder Cut for me. It's a big, loud, giant monster truck that doesn't really consistently provide big, loud monster truck carnage and excitement. It's a kind of monster truck rally that you would want your money back after sitting through 4 hours of it. Because 3 hours and 40 minutes of the time, the truck is just stalled, or it's on fire.